In 1977, 79, I introduced a couple of bills that dealt with restraining orders. That one did pass. There was another one that was defeated, and looking back historically, I think it was because it had a financial financial problem with it. At least people perceived it that way. But at least, and I got some women to come and testify, and that was very difficult to do. I had to make a commitment that they would not appear on TV, that their names would not be mentioned in the press. And one of them was unbelievable. Her husband was a cop, and he abused her. He took a Coke bottle, ripped her, left her in the desert, and time after time after time before this, she would call to whom? The police. Guess what? Nothing ever happened. So that was a really poignant testimony. And she had a very responsible job in state government, as a matter of fact. When that happened, I got all these phone calls from women around the state who had similar circumstances, people I knew that I had no idea, that they wanted to say, thank God, that this is being brought out in the open. And so that was the first part. When I got to the Senate, then it was clear that every man I would go, there were very few women ever in one body at the same time in those days. There might be one other woman senator and maybe a couple of other women in the assembly out of 40. That they would always say, well, why don't they just get up and leave? Well, where do they go? Most of the time they're not out working, having a job. They might have children. Where do they go? They're dependent upon, unfortunately, the male figure in terms of financial support, if nothing else. And of course they always say, well, I won't do it again, blah, blah, blah. And so the idea was to do something, have some way attached to raise some money. And looking around at the possibilities, it seemed like, maybe not the best, but it certainly was a possible support, was charging a $5 fee on a marriage license. And there were many, many marriages that took place in Nevada at that time. It was big business. There were a lot of wedding chapels, both in northern Nevada and in southern Nevada. And so Committee to Aid Abused Women, Joni Kaiser, who was the director at that time, sent down an intern to work with me on this issue. And it happened to be Jan Evans, who wound up being a major figure in the assembly during her time. And so we started out wondering what we were going to do. And we heard that the major lobbyist, probably to this day, I would say, the consummate lobbyist, I think, that in the state history, Jim Joyce from Las Vegas. And he was representing the wedding chapels. So we realized we had a really tough job because he always won. I mean, and it turns out I hardly ever voted for anything he introduced, and it had nothing to do with him. It was just things I didn't like. We wound up being very, very good friends. In fact, he called me right before he died. When we went and explained what we were doing, he said, you know what, I think this is really a good thing. I think I'll do it pro bono. And he told the wedding chapel people that he wasn't going to represent them. And I'm sure that Jan and I would like to think that we were responsible for getting this bill through, but I suspect he had a lot to do with it.